What if you could stop begging for someone to understand you? What if the most powerful healing didn't come from someone finally hearing your pain, but from you finally hearing yourself? That's what this video is about. Not in a self-help, motivational quote kind of way, but in the quiet, trembling place inside your chest where you felt misunderstood for so long. You stopped trying to explain. You know that place. You've been there more times than you can count. When your words came out wrong, when your truth felt like too much, when they told you to calm down, be less sensitive, move on, when love felt like something you had to earn by hiding who you really are. And still, no one saw you. You've been trying to survive by being understood. That's not your fault. Most of us were taught that someone else's validation was proof we were real, that if no one got us, maybe we weren't worth getting. But that's a lie, and I know it hurts to let it go. But on the other side of that pain is something unshakable, something that can't be taken away, something terrifyingly beautiful. Yourself. That's what you're about to meet. And once you do, you'll realize you don't need anyone else to understand you the way you thought you did. You need your own eyes on your own truth, your own arms around your own wounds, your own voice in your own silence. So take a breath. Let's walk into that space together. If this already feels like something you didn't know you needed, but somehow you do, go ahead and subscribe. Not because you have to, but because something in you wants to be met like this. Again, and maybe, just maybe, you're finally ready to stop waiting to be seen and start seeing yourself. You didn't start out trying to hide. You started out wide open like all of us do. Heart in your hands, feelings on your sleeve, eyes that believed every word when someone said, "I love you." But little by little, the world taught you a different language. It started with small things. Maybe someone laughed when you cried. Maybe they told you you were too much, too dramatic, too intense. Or maybe they didn't say anything at all, they just left, or shut down, or looked through you like you weren't even there. So you did what any soul would do when it's trying to survive. You adjusted. You quieted the parts of you that made other people uncomfortable. You stopped bringing your full self to the table, and you started editing yourself for approval without even realizing it. Every silence became a strategy. Every nod became a mask. Every smile became a soft way of saying, "Please don't leave." And then the longing grew, that ache of wanting someone, anyone, to finally understand, to see past the mask, to hold the real you, the unedited you, and whisper, "I see you. I get it. You're not too much." But the more you chased that kind of understanding, the more it slipped away. People loved the version of you that made them comfortable, not the one who told the truth. So you started to believe something dangerous, that if they don't understand you, maybe you really are broken. And that belief, it sunk into your bones. It shaped your relationships, your choices, your inner voice. You became the person always second-guessing, always trying to prove yourself, always explaining things that shouldn't need to be explained. You began to crave understanding like oxygen, and that craving, though deeply human, is also a trap, because the more you need someone else to validate your experience, the more you become disconnected from your own inner knowing. You stop trusting yourself. You stop believing your own pain. You start gaslighting yourself before anyone else even has to. That's not love. That's survival in disguise. But here's the truth. The one you've known deep down for a long time, but maybe never had the space to say out loud. You don't need anyone to understand you in order to be real. You don't need someone to agree with your feelings before you're allowed to feel them. You don't need another person's empathy to justify your pain, because your experience, your story, your truth is valid the moment it's yours. Even if no one else gets it, even if it doesn't fit their version of you, even if you've spent years twisting yourself into knots trying to be palatable, digestible, lovable, you are already whole. And the path back to yourself doesn't start with being understood by others. It starts with being honest with yourself. Can you sit with the part of you that still aches for someone to say, "I get it"? Can you tell that part, "I do. I get it. I see you now"? Because that's the beginning of everything. And when that happens, when you become the one who truly understands yourself, it's not that you stop wanting connection. It's that you stop begging for crumbs. You start holding out for the kind of love that doesn't require translation. And you realize, understanding yourself is the most radical kind of freedom. There's something that happens the first time you truly sit with yourself, without trying to fix, change, or improve anything. At first, it feels unbearable. The silence gets loud, your chest tightens. Every part of you that's been waiting for someone to notice starts screaming louder. "What now?" it asks. What do we do with all of this? Because no one taught you how to stay. They taught you how to run to distraction, to relationships, to overthinking, to busyness, to helping others so you didn't have to face yourself. But staying takes courage. And the most courageous thing you'll ever do is stop running from your own reflection. Because when you finally stop, something breaks open. It's not clean. It's not beautiful. It doesn't come with soft music and perfect lighting. It's messy. It's ugly crying at 2 a.m. It's realizing you've been at war with yourself for years and you didn't even know it. It's hearing your own voice whisper something you've never had the space to say. I'm tired. And when you finally hear that, really hear it, you begin to understand. You're not broken. You're just exhausted from carrying so much. You've been pretending to be fine when you weren't. You've been smiling when you wanted to scream. You've been giving when you had nothing left. And through all of that, you were waiting for someone to ask, "Are you okay?" and mean it. Waiting for someone to say, "I believe you. I don't need proof." Waiting for someone to sit with you in the dark and not try to turn the lights on. But what if that someone is you? What if the thing you've been searching for in others was never theirs to give? What if the deepest understanding isn't someone else finally getting you, but you finally deciding that you're worth knowing? You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not hard to love. You've just been living in a world that rewards masks and punishes depth. A world that praises you for shrinking, applauds you for adapting, and overlooks you the moment you speak from your soul. And yet, your soul keeps speaking. It speaks through the tightness in your chest when you're not being honest. It speaks through the anxiety in your body when you betray yourself to make peace. It speaks through the loneliness that creeps in even when you're surrounded by people, because your soul knows when you've abandoned yourself. And no one else can fix that. Only you. That's the uncomfortable truth most people run from. But you're here. You're listening. And that means something inside you is ready to come home, not to the version of you that's perfect, polished, and pleasing, but to the version of you that's raw, real, and reaching for your own hand. You don't need permission to love yourself like that. You just need to begin. And maybe tonight, that begins with one soft moment of honesty. I don't need them to understand me. I need to understand me. Say it again. And breathe. Understanding yourself isn't some grand breakthrough. It doesn't always come with clarity or fireworks or sudden peace. Sometimes it comes as a slow thaw, a gentle loosening of the grip you've had on who you think you're supposed to be. It's the moment you stop blaming yourself for not being easy to love and start asking, was I ever really loved at all? Or was I just useful? It's that quiet realization, sitting alone with a cup of tea, when you feel your own company and whisper, I think I like this. I think I like me. It's choosing not to respond to that text that would have pulled you back into a pattern you've outgrown. It's finally saying no, not to be rebellious, but to be real. You've spent so much of your life shape-shifting, becoming softer, quieter, nicer, just to keep the peace. You believed if you were less difficult, love would stay. You thought if you explained yourself better, they would understand. You bent over backwards, offering your heart like a peace treaty, and they still didn't meet you there. And you know what? That's not on you. It took me years to learn this, and maybe you're still learning it too. The people who truly see you don't need to be convinced. They don't require explanations or defenses. They don't make you feel like a burden just for existing. They hold space for your tears without rushing them away. And if you haven't met those people yet, it's not because you're unworthy. It's because you're still becoming the person who treats yourself that way first. Because the way you talk to yourself, that's the foundation. That's the pattern every relationship will echo. If you abandon yourself in moments of pain, you'll feel abandoned even when someone is right there. If you doubt your feelings before anyone else can, you'll seek validation like air. If you believe love has to be earned through silence, sacrifice, or self-shrinkage, you'll miss the kind that requires none of those things. So start here. Start now. Ask yourself what you've been needing someone else to say. Then say it to yourself. I believe you. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I know it hurt. I'm proud of you for surviving. These aren't affirmations, they're lifelines. Because for so long, you've been hanging by a thread called someone else's love. But today, you're weaving your own net. A place inside you that says, even if no one gets me, I do. Even if they roll their eyes at your emotions, even if they misunderstand your silence, even if they walk away when you finally speak your truth, you remain, not because you're trying to be strong, but because you're finally tired of disappearing just to be seen. Understanding yourself means recognizing the difference between abandonment and solitude, between rejection and redirection, between being unloved and being unmatched. Because the world has never met someone like you, fully you. They've only met the version who thought she had to be smaller to belong. But she's not here anymore. You are whole, worthy. Here, there's a moment quiet, almost imperceptible when the war inside you softens. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It doesn't scream, "You're healed," or "You've made it." Because real healing is humble. It's subtle. It's quiet enough to miss if you're only listening for fireworks. But if you're listening for your own breath, your own truth, your own heartbeat, then you'll feel it. It's that moment when someone misunderstands you, and for the first time, you don't panic. You don't rush to correct them. You don't start folding yourself smaller just to fit inside their version of who you should be. Instead, you sit in the discomfort of being unseen, and you stay true to yourself anyway. That's when you know something's shifted. That's when you know you're no longer building your life on the shaky foundation of someone else's approval. You're not here to be decoded like a riddle. You're not here to explain your softness, your stillness, your sensitivity. You're not here to convince anyone that you're enough, because finally, you're starting to believe that you are, even when they don't see it, especially when they don't. And here's the most unexpected part. The more you understand yourself, the less you need from others, but the more powerful your connections become. Not because you're performing for love anymore, but because you're present for it. You're no longer reaching from a place of desperation. You're offering from a place of wholeness. You don't attach to people because they make you feel complete. You connect with people who mirror the completeness you already feel. And if they don't, you bless them, you release them, you keep walking, because your peace is no longer up for negotiation. Not after everything you've walked through to get here. Not after the nights you cried without answers, without comfort, without being held. Not after the years you spent thinking there was something wrong with you for needing more. There's nothing wrong with you. You just outgrew the cages you were taught to live in. You just stopped apologizing for wanting more than surface-level connection. You just started asking deeper questions like, what do I really want? What kind of love feels safe? What kind of life feels true? And those questions, those sacred, soul-deep questions, can only be answered when you stop outsourcing your knowing. When you stop waiting for someone else to get it, and you start getting it yourself. It's not easy. It means grieving the version of you who spent her whole life chasing understanding. It means letting go of the fantasy that someone will come along and make it all make sense. It means turning inward, not to hide, but to witness, to finally see yourself the way you always hoped someone else would, to hold your own gaze and say, you don't need to be understood. You need to be honored, and that begins with you. So take another breath. Let that truth settle into the places that still feel raw. You don't need to be understood to be real. You don't need to be agreed with to be valid. You don't need anyone's permission to feel what you feel. You just need the courage to believe yourself. And you've already started. There's a kind of aloneness that used to terrify you. The kind that crept in when your phone stayed silent. When your vulnerability was met with distance. When you opened your heart and heard nothing back. You used to mistake that silence for abandonment. Proof that you were too complicated, too broken, too hard to love. But now, that same silence feels different. It feels sacred, because when you stop needing others to reflect you back to yourself, that silence becomes a mirror, and in it, you see someone you're finally starting to recognize. Someone who doesn't rush to fill space with noise. Someone who doesn't betray her own needs just to keep someone close. Someone who sits with her longing not to numb it, but to learn from it. And that's where the real shift happens, because longing isn't a flaw. It's not a weakness. It's a compass. It shows you where your soul is asking for more. More truth, more depth, more intimacy, more you. But if you've been taught to ignore that compass, to abandon your longing in favor of being easygoing or low maintenance, you've probably spent your life settling for less than you deserve. Less connection, less truth, less love. And every time someone told you to stop being so emotional, so intense, so needy, you swallowed your voice a little deeper. Until one day, you couldn't even hear it anymore. But here's what they never told you. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be known deeply. There's nothing wrong with craving a connection where you don't have to translate your soul. That desire doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And more than that, it makes you brave. Because the world doesn't always reward truth. It rewards performance. It rewards the smile when you're breaking, the nod when you disagree, the I'm fine when you're anything but. But you're done with that. You're done clapping for your own abandonment. You're done confusing being liked with being loved. You're done twisting yourself into someone digestible just so you're not left alone. Because being alone is no longer the worst thing that can happen. Being disconnected from yourself is, and you've lived that way long enough. So now when the silence comes, you don't run from it. You sit in it. You breathe through it. You say to yourself, I'm here. I've got you. I'm not leaving this time. And with every breath, you remember something that's been true all along. You are not here to be figured out. You are not a puzzle. You are not a project. You are not waiting to be saved. You are waiting to be remembered by you. So when they misunderstand you, let them. When they can't meet you in your depth, release them. When they only love you for who you pretend to be, love yourself enough to walk away. Because real love, the kind you've been aching for, begins inside. And it begins with this truth. You were never too much. You were just never truly held. Until now. There's a quiet kind of revolution that begins the moment you stop apologizing for who you are. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that demands to be seen. But the kind that happens in the small moments when you speak honestly. Even if your voice shakes. When you stop smiling just to make someone else comfortable. When you say, that hurt, instead of pretending it didn't. That's not weakness. That's self-respect. And for so long, you weren't taught that. You were taught to be agreeable, to be easy, to not rock the boat. They called it love, but it felt more like disappearing. Because every time you swallowed your truth, you lost a piece of yourself. And every time you made yourself smaller, you didn't become more lovable, you just became more alone. But now you're starting to remember. You remember what it feels like to belong to yourself. Not the curated version of you that gets applause, but the quiet, messy, beautiful you who just is without needing to explain. That's what real healing looks like. It's not about being untouched by pain. It's about not abandoning yourself when the pain comes. It's about standing in the storm of misunderstanding, and instead of shrinking, you stay, you feel, you cry, you rage, you soften. You meet every part of yourself with presence, and slowly, something shifts. You start noticing the difference between real love and performance. Real love doesn't require you to translate your soul into something simpler. Real love doesn't punish your truth. Real love doesn't make you prove that your pain is valid. It just sits with you in it. It holds space for your contradictions. It listens without needing to fix. And yes, sometimes that love comes from others, but more often than not, it begins with the one person who's been with you through it all. When you become the one who doesn't flinch at your own depth, you stop fearing your own intensity. You stop editing yourself to be loved. You stop chasing people who only understand versions of you that make them feel safe. And in their absence, you create room for something sacred. Yourself. Your full, whole, unfiltered self. The one who feels deeply, thinks fiercely, and loves with a heart that still hopes even after everything. She's not too much. She's the truth you've been running from, and the one you've always been seeking. And when you finally look in the mirror and see her not the version they wanted, but her, that's when the ache softens. Because you realize you don't need the whole world to understand you. You just need to understand her. To listen to her when she says, this doesn't feel right. To believe her when she says, I deserve more. To hold her when she says, I'm tired of fighting for love that hurts. You don't need someone else to get it. You need you to stop abandoning her. Because once you do, everything changes. There's something profound that happens the moment you stop trying to explain yourself to people who have already made up their minds about you. It's not bitterness. It's not giving up. It's peace. A peace so deep, it almost feels unfamiliar at first. Like waking up in a place where you don't have to perform to be allowed to exist. You've spent so long trying to make sense to people who couldn't hear you, who didn't want to, who filtered your words through their own fear, their own projections, their own wounds. And every time they twisted your truth, every time they dismissed your heart, a part of you wondered, is it me? But it wasn't you. It was never you. You were just trying to be seen in places that only saw you through a fog of their own limitations. That's the heartbreak most people don't talk about. Not the kind that comes from being left, but the kind that comes from being misunderstood, over and over again. So you learn to over-explain. You try to be clearer, kinder, more palatable. You abandon your edge. You round your corners. You become a softer version of yourself just to stay connected. But connection that costs you your truth isn't connection. It's captivity, and you're not here to be a prisoner of someone else's comfort. You're here to be free. And freedom begins when you stop seeking permission. Permission to feel. Permission to leave. Permission to say, that's not okay. Permission to exist in your full, raw, honest truth. Because you've always known who you are. Even in the moments you doubted it. Even in the relationships that made you question it. Even in the years you spent shrinking to fit into boxes that never belonged to you. There's a knowing inside you that never left. It just got quiet. Buried. Forgotten. But it's still there. Waiting for you to choose yourself the way you've chosen everyone else. And that choice, it's not loud. It's subtle. Gentle. Sacred. It's sitting in a room alone. Not because no one called, but because you finally stopped calling people who make you feel unseen. It's crying without shame, because your tears are not a weakness, they are proof that your heart is still open. It's feeling rage and letting it rise not to destroy, but to release every "I'm fine" you said when you weren't. It's leaving the text unanswered. It's walking away from the conversation that turns into a courtroom. It's no longer auditioning for love you already deserve. Because here's what no one tells you. Understanding yourself means protecting yourself. It means no longer abandoning your truth just to be liked. It means letting people misunderstand you and still choosing peace over performance. Because the ones who are meant for you, they won't need a script. They'll understand your silence. They'll honor your honesty. They won't flinch at your depth. But until they arrive, you become that person for yourself. And you don't do it perfectly. You do it honestly, because healing isn't about becoming bulletproof. It's about becoming real. And when you're real with yourself, really, truly real, understanding becomes less of a craving and more of a homecoming. You may not realize it yet, but something has been changing in you, subtly, quietly. Like a tide turning beneath the surface of your life. You're starting to see the ways you've made yourself small, not just in the loud, obvious moments, but in the 1,000 tiny ones that no one else saw. Like when you bit your tongue to avoid tension, when you said it's okay when it wasn't, when you reached out one more time, hoping they'd finally understand. Even though every part of you already knew they wouldn't. You did that out of love, out of hope, out of the longing to be seen, and there's no shame in that. But now, you're waking up to something different. You're waking up to the cost of those choices. You're realizing that every time you abandoned your truth for the sake of connection, it didn't bring you closer to anyone, it pulled you further away from yourself. And the pain you felt wasn't rejection. It was self-betrayal. That sting in your chest, that wasn't because they didn't understand you. It was because you did, and you ignored it. You heard the whisper. You knew something felt off. You sensed the mismatch between your soul and the situation. But you stayed. You smiled. You compromised because being misunderstood felt safer than being alone. But here you are now, still standing, still breathing, and slowly choosing differently. You're learning that solitude is not the enemy. It's where your voice gets loud again. It's where the clarity comes back. It's where your nervous system exhales for the first time in years. And in that stillness, you begin to hear the truth you've been silencing. I'm not here to be understood by everyone. I'm here to be me. Not the digestible version, not the agreeable version, the full, layered, complex version of you that doesn't always have the right words, but feels everything deeply. The one who sees red flags and walks away now. The one who no longer mistakes chaos for passion. The one who can finally tell the difference between love and control, between connection and convenience. You didn't used to know, but you know now. And maybe you're still scared. Maybe it still hurts. Maybe your heart still flinches at the thought of being seen in your fullness and left anyway. That's okay. It takes time to trust yourself again, to realize that your depth isn't a burden, it's a gift. To believe that the right people won't just tolerate your truth, they'll treasure it. But until those people come, and even after they do, you are responsible for holding that treasure first. You, only you. So when the ache for understanding rises again, and it will remember, that ache is not asking for them to get it. It's asking for you to stay with yourself, to not explain away your truth, to not soften your boundaries just because someone says you're hard to love, to not leave your own side, because that is the healing, not the kind that looks good from the outside, the kind that changes everything from the inside. And it starts now. You may not have noticed it yet, but this is the most intimate relationship of your life, the one you have with yourself. And for years, you've been showing up to it halfway. You gave yourself leftovers. You judged your own tears. You ignored your body's whispers. You begged for someone to treat you the way you were unwilling to treat yourself, but not anymore. Not now. Now, you're waking up to the truth you always knew beneath the noise. You were never too much, you were just in the wrong rooms. And maybe the most sacred decision you'll ever make is to stop walking into rooms that require you to become someone else. You've tried. God. You've tried. You've smiled through discomfort. You've performed your own silence. You've convinced yourself that being tolerated was enough. But the ache in your chest says otherwise. It says you're done. Done explaining your softness to people who think vulnerability is weakness. Done pretending that surface-level conversations feed your soul. Done staying in places where your presence is met with confusion instead of reverence. And it's not because you think you're better. It's because you've spent too long convincing yourself you were less deserving, less worthy, less clear. But you're not less of anything. You've just been looking for reflection in cracked mirrors. No more. Now, you become the mirror. You become the one who sees clearly, who meets herself in the fog and says, I will not abandon you today. That is the beginning of everything. Because when you understand yourself, really understand, you stop needing the world to mirror you perfectly. You stop bleeding your truth on people who can't hold a paper cut. You stop over-explaining your boundaries to people who were never listening. And you start walking with a kind of quiet power. The kind that doesn't shout to be seen, the kind that doesn't fight to be chosen, the kind that knows because you've finally chosen you. That's what this has always been about. Not being understood by them, but being returned to yourself. Being seen in your own eyes and loved anyway, especially when you're messy, especially when you're uncertain, especially when the world doesn't clap, because you're not performing anymore. You're not proving anymore. You're not trying to earn love like a currency. You are love. You are truth. You are more than the version of you they were willing to hold, and now you know that. Not because someone finally said it to you, but because you finally said it to yourself. So when they misunderstand you again, and they will, you won't bend. You won't beg. You won't explain yourself to stay. You'll smile, you'll breathe, and you'll walk away without leaving yourself behind. Because you're not waiting to be understood. You're already home.